The light was faint, just brushing against the edges of the curtains. The clock on the nightstand glowed 5:14 a.m. But Elias was already awake. Not from any alarm, not from any noise, but from the pull of words. He lay still for a moment, the ceiling above him dim in the pale light. He blinked once, then twice. His mind was already forming the shape of a new sentence, a new thought, a line that had come to him in that delicate space between dreaming and waking. The wind didn't whisper like it used to. It screamed now, like it knew something the boy didn't. Yes, that was a good one. He had to write it down before it disappeared into the fog of memory. He reached for the notebook on the shelf beside his bed, a small worn-out journal covered in stickers and pencil smudges. With sleepy hands, he scribbled the sentence down, pausing briefly as if the pen could pull more words out of him by waiting. He smiled. This was how many of his days began, not with yawns, not with groans, but with language. Elias was 16, but he often felt older, not in body, but in mind. He had discovered writing like someone discovers a secret door in their house, by accident, but once opened, it changed everything. He slid out of bed and tiptoed to the window. Outside, the world still slept. The neighborhood was cloaked in blue shadows, the trees unmoving, the street empty. He loved it like this. When the world hadn't yet chosen who to be, he whispered to the silence, "Today, I'm going to write something real." By 6:00 a.m., Elias had already brushed his teeth, washed his face, and brewed himself a cup of black tea. No sugar, no milk, just heat, flavor, and silence. He sat by the kitchen table, the notebook still in hand. His parents were asleep. His little brother, Leo, wouldn't wake up for another hour. It was Elias's time, his hour of power, as he called it. This morning he wasn't just writing random ideas, he was working on a novel. It didn't have a name yet, but it was about a boy who could hear the thoughts of inanimate objects. Trees, stones, broken clocks. They whispered their pasts to him, and he couldn't ignore them. It was a strange idea, but Elias liked strange. He wrote 2 pages before stopping to sip his tea, then another, and another. At 7:00, Leo's footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Morning, bookhead," Leo mumbled. Rubbing his eyes, Elias chuckled. "Morning, chaos child." They had a good relationship. Leo didn't fully understand Elias's obsession with writing, but he respected it in his own goofy way. Sometimes he even drew characters for Elias's stories, horrible, off-proportion doodles that made them both laugh. The 2 boys had a quick breakfast, toast, boiled eggs, and banana slices, and talked about school. Leo was excited for PE. Elias was less thrilled about algebra. But what kept Elias energized wasn't the classes, it was the people. People were full of secrets, even if they didn't know it. How they walked, how they laughed, how they avoided eye contact when lying. Elias noticed it all. He didn't just go to school to learn, he went to observe. The school bell rang at 8:00 a.m., echoing through the halls like a command. Elias walked through the gates with his backpack slung over one shoulder and his notebook tucked securely between his textbooks. He didn't talk much on the way in. He didn't need to. His eyes were busy scanning everything. There was Jamal, the tall boy who always wore 2 wristwatches, but never checked the time. There was Lena, who laughed with her hand covering her mouth, like she was protecting a secret. And there was Mr. Hargrove, the math teacher, who smiled only when he spoke about numbers. To others, these were ordinary people. To Elias, they were characters. In English class, while the teacher discussed metaphor and simile, Elias's mind drifted. He wasn't bored. No, quite the opposite. Words excited him, but his imagination didn't stay caged for long. He wrote on the edge of his notebook. Her voice was a winter wind. Cold, sharp, and honest. Was that about the teacher? Maybe. Or maybe about a girl in his story. It didn't matter. It felt real, and that was enough. Later in the lunchroom, Elias sat at his usual table by the window. His friends joined him. Adam, who played guitar and wore paint-splattered jeans, and Yasmin, who talked like every sentence was a poem. "Did you write anything new?" Yasmin asked, sipping her juice. Elias shrugged, pretending it was nothing. "A little." "Let me guess," Adam said. "Something about a lonely robot again?" Elias grinned. "Actually, yeah." They laughed, but not to mock him. They respected what he did. even if they didn't fully get it. He pulled out his notebook and read a few lines. Yasmin snapped her fingers in delight. That's real writing. You're not just writing, you're painting with words. Elias felt the heat rise in his cheeks. Compliments made him nervous, but they also kept him going. After school, Elias walked home alone. The streets were noisy now. Kids shouting, cars honking, a dog barking at a cat. The chaos of the world tried to distract him, but he was thinking, what if none of it matters? What if no one ever reads my stories? What if I'm not actually good? These questions attacked him sometimes, like tiny storms. Doubt had a sneaky voice. It didn't shout, it whispered. And worst of all, it sounded like his own voice. But Elias had a trick. Whenever he doubted himself, he reread an old story, the one that made his teacher cry, or the one his mom printed out and put on the fridge, or the poem that won second place in the school contest. He wasn't perfect, but he was growing, and growth, he knew, was a kind of magic. Back home, the sun dipped low, casting golden light across his desk. Elias opened his window and let the breeze in. He sat down to write again, this time with less pressure. He wasn't writing for school, or friends, or praise. He was writing for the feeling, for the world he could build from silence, for the characters that waited for him to bring them to life, for the way writing made him feel like he belonged somewhere, even if that place only existed in ink and paper. By 9 p.m., he had written 3 pages. Not his best work, but honest. He leaned back in his chair, eyes tired, but heart full. His mom peeked into the room. Still writing? She asked gently. He nodded. Just finished. She smiled. Good, but don't forget, you live in this world too. I know, he said, with a soft laugh. I'm just visiting the other one for a while. The night whispers. The clock struck 10:47 p.m. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the wall clock, and the soft hum of the night breeze brushing the window curtains. Elias lay on his bed, the notebook still resting on his chest. He had promised himself he would sleep earlier tonight, but promises were easy to break when the mind was alive with stories. He had written 5 full pages after dinner. His hand ached slightly, but in a good way, like a runner after a race. It meant he had pushed himself. It meant he hadn't wasted the day. But something bothered him. A scene in his story, just one, didn't feel right. A conversation between the main character and his mother. The words felt fake, like puppets speaking lines instead of real people sharing pain. He stared at the ceiling again. That blank white ceiling had witnessed so many of his silent struggles. What am I missing? He whispered. Then he remembered something. His own mother. How she had looked at him the day his father lost his job. The worry in her eyes, hidden behind a tight smile. That was what the story needed. Not just dialogue, truth, real emotion. He got up, grabbed his pen again, and rewrote the scene from memory. Not as fiction, but as something close to home. When he finished, he let out a long breath. His chest felt lighter. It was past midnight, but he was finally at peace. That night, Elias dreamed he was inside one of his stories. He walked through a forest made of floating paper trees. The wind whispered unfinished sentences. In the sky above, stars formed constellations that shaped words. Some he had written. Some he hadn't yet. He saw a boy sitting alone on a bench made of old books. Elias approached. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your first character," the boy replied, looking up with a soft smile. "You left me behind, years ago." Elias felt a pang in his heart. "I didn't mean to, I know," the boy said. "But I've been waiting. So have the others." Suddenly dozens of characters emerged from behind the trees. Pirates, grandmothers, lonely robots, dreaming children, talking animals. They weren't angry. They weren't sad. They were just waiting to be heard again. Elias woke up with tears in his eyes. It was 6:03 a.m. The sun was just rising. Elias sat at his desk once more, his notebook open, his pen steady. But this time, he didn't hesitate. He began to write, not just a story, but a letter to all the characters he had ever created, and all those still waiting in the corners of his mind. "I hear you," he wrote. I see you. I promise I will return. He knew then that writing wasn't just a hobby. It wasn't just something to do when he was bored. It was his way of seeing the world, of understanding himself, of making sure the quiet voices inside him were never forgotten. And perhaps, just perhaps, someone, somewhere, would read his words one day and feel a little less alone.